Okay, we are live and ready to rock and roll.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the special meeting regarding the tax levy. Roll call, please. Veronica?
Ms. Casbon-LaTourette? Mr. Coleman?
Here.
Mr. Gray? Mr. Guziak?
Here.
Ms. Hyde?
Here.
Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Ms. Ori?
All right. You can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so this portion of our meeting tonight, this is a special Board of Education meeting, and the only way we can take action is to have a special meeting, or it has to be part of a regular meeting. So we had this special meeting. The only action we're taking, not to approve the property tax levy. The property tax levy gets approved in December, but we are putting it on public display so that we are being transparent in what the property tax levy will be for the following year. This is something that we do each and every year. We have a meeting and we present the upcoming year's property tax levy, and the board has a chance to weigh in and the community has a chance to weigh in, and then we approve the levy in December. And we need to file it with the county before December 21st-ish, Dr. Johns?
The last Tuesday in December.
The last Tuesday in December, whatever that falls on. So we need to do that in order to fund our school for the following year. So let's take a look at the property tax levy.
I do want to also comment that by Illinois law, the property tax levy must be presented to the board at least 20 days prior to the adoption.
Right.
If we wait until November 30th, it would only be like 15 days, so 14 days. So we need to do it now as opposed to waiting until November 30th.
Right.
Okay. Now, let me go over this part. It's a little confusing even to me sometimes. This is the 2020 property tax levy, and it uses the assessed value of properties in our school district in 2020 for property taxes we'll collect in calendar year 2021 that fund budget year, fiscal year 2022. So we're actually looking quite a ways out to where this is going to actually impact our budget, but the law requires us to do it in this fashion. So with the exception of new property that comes onto the roll, the increase is limited to CPI, which for this levy was 2.3%. And it applies to all funds except debt service and the Special Education District of Lake County. Debt service is set originally by the referendum that created that debt. And CDOL has the special law that allows us to advertise on their behalf for our portion of their IMRF fund.
Right.
So that's where that is. Dr. Lind and I are recommending a 4.4% increase for advertisement. This does a couple different things for us. The only data that I have was as of like mid to late October as far as what the assessed values of our properties are. They still will add new properties and make adjustments in assessed value through typically mid to late November. So that means that while I have a snapshot of where we were a month ago, I don't know exactly where we are now. So by advertising higher, it gives us that flexibility. It also allows us, depending on where we need the money the most in the different funds, it allows us to shift it from one fund to the other. I can't increase the levy more than what I advertise. So let's say if I needed another $20,000 in the education fund, I can't move it there unless the levy I advertised was high enough to allow me to. So this just gives us some flexibility in that respect as well. If you flip to the next page, one more. That's the calendar. And I think I had shared that with the board previously, just kind of showing that by December 14th, then we have to, the board has to approve it. And then I have to file it by the last Tuesday in December. I don't know if people had a chance to look at this worksheet, or if you wanted me to go through it. This is something that I put together a few years ago that just kind of takes everybody step by step through the process of calculating what our levy is going to be, including the new construction. And this year we only had about as of the date that I got the information, we had about 114,000 in new construction. When I look back at last year, we had about 600,000. And that's 1/3 the assessed value, 1/3 the EAV, equalized assessed value, is 1/3 of the market value. So this is about
54,000.
Okay, 354,000
ish
in market value of property.
Somewhere in that neighborhood, or less.
So basically, step one is just the information. Step two, we basically take last year's levy, increase it by 2.3%, or take 2.3% of that. So the new levy can increase by 263,132. So then that's without new construction. The new construction adds about $5,600. That 113,000 generates about $5,600. So then the total increase, including new construction, is about 269, just a little under 269,000. Which then, because the new property is not subject to the cap, instead of the it really doesn't show up much. So it's still basically 2.3%. Go ahead and skip to the next one. Now this one on the top portion there, I've listed it. There are actually two kinds of tax caps. One is the PTEL, which is a property tax extension limitation law, which doesn't allow the total capped levies, which is all of the ones in that top section, to increase by more than what CPI increased from December of one year to the next year. But then individual funds also have a cap based on what your rate can be. Some of them, like the education fund, used to have a cap, now it doesn't. So for instance, operations and maintenance, I can only have a levy of 55 cents per $100,000 assessed value. And the working cash is a nickel, so those are all limited based on PTEL. So that's basically what I think we're going to get. So then if you scroll down to the bottom section, we increase those overall by 4.4%. If you look at the purple in the center, that shows the total increase, even though some funds I increase more than others. One of the ones that we always seem to have some variation with is the IMRF and Social Security Fund. Because even though they're separate levies, they're in the same fund. So we have to go back each year and look and see how much did we spend for IMRF and how much did we spend for Social Security and Medicare, and then make the adjustments between those two levies so that, for instance, the IMRF fund isn't paying Social Security for some of our staff. Because when they do the IMRF audit, they specifically want you to be able to show that that IMRF levy isn't supporting something other than IMRF. So basically, overall, the cap funds would increase by 4.4%, and the non-cap funds would increase, with the total levy increases by 5.71. And that's only because of the bond and interest and the CBO IMRF that both increase.
So taking note of our bond and interest fund for just a brief second, because that's a key to the levy and a key to the key point of interest to taxpayers, I believe, in our district, is that the bond payment, or what we are going to collect to pay off the bonds for our buildings, is $4.4 million next year. That's a huge amount of our overall tax bill. We're collecting a total of 16.4, so roughly 25%, or a little more than 25% of that is just to pay off the bonds. And we have how many more years of that?
The final payment is January of 2024.
For the district.
The 23-24 school year will be the year that we pay off the bonds.
Right.
Yeah, I've actually had an inquiry this year from, personally, I've had a request from one taxpayer as well as a realtor who wanted to know, was something going to happen with our tax rate? When was it going to go down?
Yeah.
Because they were at least aware that we had bonds that were outstanding.
Yep.
And they both seemed very appreciative and somewhat relieved once they found out that at least there was an end to the increases.
Yes, there is a light at the end of the tunnel as far as.
It's just unfortunate that
there's 3 more years of pain.
When the bonds were first issued, the district was growing rapidly. There really wasn't an end in sight with that, and then the 2007 kind of banking crisis happened, and then all of a sudden building stopped and everything else stopped, and so we didn't have the increases in assessed value that would have made these increases in the bond and interest fund or the debt service fund. They would not have appeared so dramatic if we had more assessed value, because that's a bigger pie than to distribute those costs out over. It's also something too, when people's own individual property values declined, but yet their tax bill kept going up. A lot of people didn't and still don't understand that really doesn't have, it matters what their tax bill is, but it doesn't matter as far as what the amount of money that you still need to collect. And that's one of the things that when you have people protesting but appealing their assessed value, all that does, if somebody gets theirs lowered, it means somebody else is going to have to, it means that everybody else has to pay more. Because if the pie stays the same size, it's just how big your slice of that pie is, if that makes any sense.
Complete.
Okay.
It is confusing, but yes, I understand.
Okay. Then the rest of the documents here are just, the next one is actually what we put on display technically, which is the certificate of tax levy. Can you scroll down?
Yep.
And this is actually the document that will be up for approval in December. This uses that advertised rate on it, even though I don't think we're going to get this much. This is the 4.4% increase, even though we're probably going to be closer to that 2.3 or 2.4% increase, depending on new property. So this shows each of the funds and what the advertised levy is. And then the next document is the special education district levy for IMRF purposes, which also is included in that previous document. The previous document includes everything except debt service and or bond and interest fund. And the reason that's not on here is because that was already authorized by taxpayers when the referendum was done. So the county automatically just assigns the debt service or bond and interest levy. And the only thing that would change that would be if the board would determine that they wanted to do an abatement of some type. So that's something that we don't have to decide now. Probably if that was something the board wanted to explore, ideally you'd want to do it in either December or January. I think the deadline is sometime in February. So does anybody have any questions about the levy process and what we've done here? Or what I'm recommending?
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no questions, then I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn the special meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Wait a second, Denise. We should probably approve the posting of this and make a motion for that. I think we missed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we do. I take that back.
I move that we approve the posting of the public tax levy, property tax levy. Second.
Veronica, could you please do a roll call?
Mr. Coleman, Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray, Mr. Guziak,
Yes.
Ms. Ide,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Ori.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
Oh, she's absent, sorry.
All right, if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that adjourns our special meeting, and we will go right into our November Committee of the Whole meeting. And we've already done our roll call and the Pledge of Allegiance, and okay. Then we'll go on to our first order of business tonight is the first reading of board policies. We've got quite a few of them.
Excuse me, Denise.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity to add a discussion item?
Oh, sure. We can do that.
Okay.
What would you like to add?
I think I'd like a little discussion as to how we're going to address an item on the IASB resolutions and what we're going to ask Mr. Gray to vote on one of the items.
Sure, we can add that.
Okay. Specifically, it has to do with, I guess, the second proposed resolution, which is gun storage in private homes. And I know the IASB is recommending that they do not adopt it, but I think a little discussion on the topic might be helpful to see which way we were going to ask our representative to vote.
Sure. Just as a reminder, so Stephen is going to be our delegate this year, and he will be virtually attending on this Saturday at 10 a.m. There is a packet that you should have been able to access before, but if not, I did send out an email today just as a reminder of the resolution packet, which has all the resolutions listed and also the IASB recommendations. So if everybody wants to make sure that they do look at that prior to the weekend, so that we can give, there's a page at the beginning of it where you can say what you would recommend for those resolutions, and then we can get those to Stephen and let him know. But yeah, we can definitely add the gun storage discussion to the agenda this evening. Is there anything else anybody wants to add? Okay. All right. So then we will go on to the board policy updates.
I'd like to point out just a couple of items on 5/3/30. We will make the vacation days and holidays align with our collective bargaining agreements, our CBAs. So this is a boilerplate policy for the first reading. So we have not approved this policy yet, but we will make sure that those align with our collective bargaining agreement, which it does state in there, but we want to reduce that confusion. Also, there's a lot of other policies added that have to do with Title IX. There's been some new legislation regarding Title IX, so policy 265, 2:265 is a brand new policy to the board. And there's a lot of overlap and a lot of references in other policies that you can see here, like 2260, 520, 710, 720, 7180, 7185. Might be a couple others in there, but those are related to that legislation, and those policies just came out, so we need to adopt them before the end of the school year, or at the end of the calendar year. There's some deadlines in the legislation that make these policies important to change. So I just wanted to point that out, and that's why there's a bunch more this time than there have been in the past. If you have any questions about those, I'm happy to answer them as well.
So it'll be very important for us to get this on at least the next regular board meeting agenda.
Correct.
For approval.
Okay, so how do we have discussion on some of these items then? I mean, there's probably three here that are probably starting to really get to the point of at least some interest, at least for me. Not that the others aren't interesting, but these are more targeted, I think, for so what, for instance, here, maybe if I start with this.
Yeah.
6:210 instructional materials. 6:220 instructional materials selection and adoption. And then 6:260 complaints about curriculum, instructional materials, and programs. Probably, I shouldn't say probably, over the last few years, a lot of the questions that I've gotten have to do with what's being taught, and not only what's being taught, but how it's being taught. Mm-hmm. So how do these items get discussed? How do we know what's going to be in these policies?
So, Jason, would you mind putting up, if we could, maybe we just start with the first one that you have a question on, Jim, or that you want to discuss, the 6:210 instructional materials?
Sure.
Do you have a specific, can you point me to a specific spot in the policy that you would like to discuss?
No, at this point, no, Jason, and that was okay. Really a part of my question. So it seems like the board does not have access or input into the instructional materials themselves, other than saying that yes, the school district can have money or they can't have money for for things that are requested. And a lot of the questions that I get or over the time have been, how do we know what's in this curricula? And how is it being taught? And is it, well, for lack of a better term, is it being taught fairly? And we don't have access. And, I'm sure I've brought this up, at least a couple times over the years. We don't have a lot of input to the actual instructional content for the materials that we buy. So I don't know if anyone covers it, but, enlighten me.
So Jim, I have to say regarding the policies, we do have opportunity for discussion on the policies, but I think what may be of concern to you, and of course, what I always try and look for within the policies is, one, what are they trying to bring us to? In how would those be applied? But what I can say on policy 6210, as you look through it, it says that anyone will have the right to access and inspect any textbook or instructional material.
Okay, if we could take a look at that, if that's available, Jason, please.
Yeah, so it's after the numbered section.
Nope, still not there.
Can you just pull up from the press policy? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a lot of pages.
Very different than what we get.
I was gonna say it's 142 pages.
I think it's 72, Jason, is the page number for the beginning of the updated policy for 6210.
Here at 6-1. One more.
One more. I'm sorry, I don't have page numbers. There we go.
Nope.
The paragraph right after 5.
Yeah, so if you look right after the numbers.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we can get a list of the textbooks, potentially. Here, I'm trying to.
Yeah, anyone may inspect a textbook or instructional material.
Okay, by anyone, that means what? Any taxpayer in the district, I would imagine.
That means anybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause
All right,
they
so that
specify-
we can get the list. Great. Okay. So if we move on from there, we move on to selection and adoption. What kind of input, either from citizens that don't have kids in school, or parents, or parents, how do?
Well, I think they fall under.
How do they supply feedback on the materials and the adoption of the materials?
Before the adoption or after the adoption?
Either. I mean, before would be better. I mean, obviously, but after the fact.
So generally, before we adopt any program, we advertise it for a long time. Usually it takes us a year before we adopt any program. If I'm thinking about the most recent adoptions. So the most recent adoption would be the National Geographic, right? Our middle school social studies books.
Right.
So the board had access to them. We advertised it with the community as part of the board process and otherwise, and anybody could look at the materials that wanted to. You have full access. So that's the most recent. The one before that would be our ARC, the American Reading Company reading curriculum at the elementary school. That took us almost 2 years to adopt. And again, we had a lot of public discussion at the board level about that material. Now, I'm not sure if you're asking about every single book that's involved with the American Reading Company materials.
I guess what I might be thinking about here, Jason, is public input. I mean, not even just the board, but how do we get public input?
I would say we get public input through board policy, because it lists here what the parameters are in which we are to do this. So we could do that through a board policy, and we also do that through our strategic planning process. So when we go through those processes, when I'm looking at curriculum, I'm looking at curriculum that will help us meet the goals and the direction of the district that the board and the community has set, if that makes sense.
It could, maybe the part that I'm missing here a little bit is what the community sets.
Okay.
We did have board meetings where this was presented, and it would have been good to have some, some involvement from the community.
Right, and we know that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and that can be an issue, right?
But that's it. That's our, it's designed that way so that they take a year piloting stuff. So we had like 3. I remember the English. There was like 3 programs that they were piloting. They brought all 3 to us, and then they said, we like the art one best, and we discussed it at one meeting, and it was actually several meetings we discussed it, at least 2 or 3. And then we approved it. So during that time, if somebody had been following board notes or come to meetings, they would know that we're looking at these materials, and they could go see them for themselves, or come in and ask for a copy. And they're more than welcome to come to board meetings and share their thoughts and feelings, or if they know a board member, call them and ask them. I mean, are you suggesting that when we start looking at curriculum, we send out messages to parents and say, hey, we're starting to look at curriculum for next year. Do you have any input?
Well, I didn't think about that, but that's not a half bad idea.
The other thing go ahead, Jim.
Some of what I'm hearing is, and granted, some of this is because the parents that are able to overhear some of the teaching that goes on remotely now. I don't know. There's some questions, and I'll be honest with you. I had my own questions about some of the material and whether it was, may I use the term, fair and balanced in its presentation. So this, and again, this has come up over the last couple few years, and it has been a little bit of a concern. And I'm wondering, we can say, yeah, parents, if they want to be involved, they should come to the meetings. But quite frankly, I would think that the board would have an obligation to make sure that there's ensure that there's a level playing field when it comes to what's being taught to the kids. And I don't have that feeling. And it's even more so when I'm able to listen in on some of the classwork now that it's remote. So if we take those 2 items, the instructional materials, selection and adoption, and then if we get to 260, complaints about the curriculum, what does that look like? In other words, is there a process to complain about what's being taught and how it's being taught, or the materials that are being used?
While you're scrolling to that, Jason, I'm wondering if I can see how difficult it would be for a parent necessarily to, even if you're kind of watching for the upcoming board meetings, to find out when we're going to discuss something. I'm wondering if we could maybe put something in our board agenda calendars, because we typically start, if we're going to be looking at piloting, there's certain times of the year that we would be piloting and that sort of thing. So if we could put that, even if it was a ballpark of when we might be looking at not just a pilot program or considering a new program in our board calendar, where that's at the top of the section now on the BOE for the agendas of meeting minutes and whatnot. That might be helpful for parents to say, okay, I can look here and see, okay, the spring we're going to start looking at that. I should be paying attention to the board agendas for those meetings.
I guess what this all boils down to is I don't get the warm, fuzzy feeling that we're picking a level playing field when it comes to what we're teaching the kids. And some of that is classroom. Some of that was some resources that some previous instructors were using. And some of it is what, I guess perhaps you could call it personal bias of some of the instructors. And I think some of this is also still bleeding into the materials that we're selecting to some extent. I mean, it's not across the board, but it seems to me like there may be. And that doesn't pass the smell test.
Well, Jim, I can tell you that 100% accuracy that every teacher in our district has personal bias.
Absolutely. We all do.
Exactly.
How we deal with it when it comes to youngsters is a whole different matter.
Right. And I'm sure there's many people that agree with you that our curriculum does reveal personal bias and that there's bias in the curriculum because those writers are written by people the curriculum is written by people as well. So I can tell you that we do our best to teach in a non-biased fashion as best we can, but I'm guessing that our personal bias does come through from time to time. I'm sure it does. So we do need to get better at that. So going back to the board policy and the issue at hand, we can talk. It sounds like we're talking a little bit about communication with how our process is for adopting curriculum, and we can be more open and actually recruit more. I think what you're asking for is to go out and actively garner more input in the curriculum selection process from parents. That's fine. We can certainly do that.
We have a means of communication now, right? So,
right.
We wouldn't, I understand what Denise is saying about the calendar, but I don't know that we want to limit curriculum review to a particular time in the calendar, thinking that some people should be looking at that time of year. But I think, if there's a curriculum that's going to be assessed, just communicate that.
Right.
Like anything else.
Right. And go out. And so the complaint process, there is a complaint process, and what we don't have is a curriculum objection form. I've never seen that form in our district, but you can use the uniform grievance process for any complaint, and that's in our policy as well.
I would be willing to bet that there's 1% of the parents in the district that even knows that something like that exists. And I say that because I didn't even know that existed. And by golly, if I would have known it 2 years ago, I would have used it. So it seems like it may be appropriate, maybe open for discussion, I would guess, that there be a little bit more in the way of outreach when it comes to the curriculum. For the most part, the board seems to evaluate curriculum not by what's actually in it, but by the feedback we get from the teachers that are doing the piloting. I mean, which is good input. Don't get me wrong. I mean, of course, and that's certainly on the financial aspects of it. But it doesn't seem to go very deep.
Yeah, and we did have some discussion, Jim, when we were talking about adopting the National Geographic.
Yes, and that was one of the better examples, actually.
Yeah.
That was.
And again, at that time, I'd say it's very clear that there's oftentimes strong bias when it comes to history curriculum at this time. But, you know, again, I think we even acknowledged at that time, that's life in the modern world. And it's who invests in that process and who doesn't invest in the process. Those who invest in the process will be the ones gaining the influence. So,
Okay, I'm having a little trouble hearing you, but I believe I understand. I understand what you're saying, Sean. Given that the parents can't necessarily be so deeply involved with this topic, it would almost seem like the board has a responsibility to fill that gap in, to ensure, you know, to as much extent as possible that you know that the kids are hearing both sides of whatever particular topic or curriculum or whatever is being taught, that they're getting both sides of it. And it's not very, it's, I'm not convinced that that's happening. And I'm wondering if there anything can be done to do that. And that could be a board. I mean, that could be a job of the board. We are elected we are elected in order to represent, you know, the voters. So maybe that should be part of our job, to dig into this deeper on behalf of the voters.
Yeah, like you said, we had good discussion, I think, on National Geographic. Again, I think the one challenge that you'd run into is if you're to present two sides, which I think curricula often fails to do, then now you're getting into pulling up supplemental materials, and then there may be questions on, you know, what's shared in those supplemental materials. But I share the same concerns as you.
Right, but what's the alternative if there aren't supplemental materials? If they're necessary and they're not used, then it's only then one side of any particular topic is only being covered, because we don't want to go further and either supply or allow the materials that allow the other side to be heard. That's not any good either. So I mean, I guess what I'm here is that and not much can be actually covered here. What I wanted to do was just bring up the concerns on these three topics.
I'd take a look at the policies. You know, we have the list from the first reading. Take a look at the policies in the press manual, and you know, identify any objections you might have, as I've done, and recording that out on this spreadsheet for based on feedback and review the policies. It is it's a tedious exercise, but I think it's something that's very important, and I encourage you to do it. Definitely. Or again, if we adopt the policy, even if we adopt the prior policy as is, where we're talking about curriculum, you know, maybe at that time introduce the idea of some processes that could be put in place, as you just did, as we just discussed, to ensure that there's adequate review.
Okay, sorry, I was on mute.
All right, are there any other items that you guys want to discuss with the first reading? There is a good amount of reading that was sent to us for this first reading of policies, and there is that spreadsheet with the notes from the policy review committee. Anything else? All right. The next one is first reading of the 2020-2021 tax levy, but I'm guessing that's already been covered in the previous meeting.
That's done.
Okay, good. All right, on to review and revise, if necessary, board agenda calendar in the drive, which is also on our website now.
Let me see if I can get back to that. Whoop. Was it under general information?
Oh, where are you looking for it on the web?
Yeah.
So on our website, if you go into the BOE tab and go into the meetings, agendas, and minutes, it's right at the top above the 2020-2021 school year.
I'm not seeing it.
Let's see, I'm trying to see your page. So if you go into, click on the meetings, agendas, and minutes.
Oh,
There you go.
there. Got it.
So the only thing I was thinking, and I wasn't able to edit it, in July, what was it? Every 2 years in July, we'll need to approve the e-learning or remote learning. Is that right?
Yes, yes, something like that. How's that?
Perfect.
It's officially called e-learning for what needs to be approved
Gotcha.
for emergency days. Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Does anyone else have anything that they want updated? Okay. Well, then let's move on to the house lease lottery contract for 2021, 2022.
Okay. So I talked to our current tenant in the building, and just as a reminder, we offer that for district employees. We are able to offer that for district employees, and they do building checks on the weekends in lieu of rent, and they're able to stay in that building and help us maintain it as well. So it works out well for the district and for the person that does it, that's in the building. So every 3 years, I believe, we open this up for a lottery. We decided this year to put that off a year just because of COVID and the uncertainty of what's happening. Wait one more year to make any transition in that building for the tenant. And so the tenant that currently resides there agreed to continue one more year. So if the board is willing to do that, I'd be happy to continue that on.
Are you looking for kind of just a straw poll, or did you want us to make
Yep.
this an action item next month or the next meeting?
It only needs to be an action item if we're going. I don't think it needs to be an action item. We're just extending the lease.
Okay. Yeah, I'm great with that. I think having less uncertainty is good.
Maybe it will be. Well, if it's an action item, you'll know. You'll know why. The action will be a 1 year extension to approve an extension for 1 year for the lease on the what we call the Foss property because that's the original owner. back when Mrs. Foss was a teacher here a long time ago, but we digress.
All right. Okay, anybody else have anything for that? Okay, let's move on to replacement of MES copier near the media center.
Okay. At the last meeting, the board asked several questions for me to look into as far as repairs, et cetera. And the copier that we were discussing replacing is the, Jason, do you want to pull up my board report
Sure.
and go to page 3? There's yellow highlighting on it.
There is.
Scroll down a little bit further.
Oh, there it is.
So for that particular machine in the last since October, from 2017 through October 2020, there have been 20 service calls on that machine. The next two highest number of service calls are on the other two copiers that are at just slightly over 2 million, and then a smaller number on the others that have lower counts. So, you know, it's one of those that economically it would be easier to, you know, look at replacing one or two at a time as opposed to doing all of them. Like I said, when we did the last, in the information I presented, I kind of gave the range of pricing that we got when we did our last RFP. And Techstar, who we went with, basically ended up at that lower end of that spectrum, and because we didn't have to replace all the machines at once, it made it more economical for the district. But based on this, personally, my recommendation would be, unless they would recommend some kind of a huge increase in our maintenance agreement, just going ahead and replacing this one machine and then look over the next couple of years to replace the others. The machines that we have is a 7500 series machine, and even though it's an older machine, there is still very good parts availability for those machines, because they're continuing to, the new machines actually use the same parts. They've just made other little refinements and things in them, but we haven't had any issues getting parts. It's just that when you get up to 2.5 million copies, there are so many parts that are wearing out that it's very difficult to keep it, you know, functioning on a daily basis like we really need it to be working. I did also find out that the one that, you know, that they have offered us with the postscript, the postscript is about $1,500 additional if we were to add that to the U.S. Communities Consortium bid. So instead of $13,200, it would be about $14,700. So it also, you know, that gives you an idea of, almost like when you buy a demonstrator car, that, you know, you do get a discount. We have purchased demos in the past, and we've had good luck with them. And actually, many of the machines that we've had over the years have also been refurbished machines as well. So that's kind of where that is. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
No, man, it's clear, you can see the maintenance just goes up exponentially.
You know, although it's, you know, and it's basically based on the number of copies, not necessarily on the age of the machine.
Mm-hmm.
But I have been very pleased that we have, we've only had to replace one machine since we got the machines in 2014. And then we did purchase the 2 color copiers either last year or the year before, one for each main office. The first copier on there with only 262,000 copies, that's a small copier that was in the elementary office and is now in the business office. So that's why it has such low numbers, because it's not a high-speed copier, high-volume copier. It's basically more of a convenience copier. And all I put on here were the large machines, with the exception of that one. So we do have 2, I think they're just a year old, or are they 2 years old, Jason? Just a little over a year old, I believe, the 2 color copiers.
Thanks for putting this information together. it's very clear.
No problem. It was one of those things that, you know, there were lots of questions, and I thought it would be nice just to kind of give the historic information about what we've done in the past and what results we got. And I can say that when we did the RFP before, it really did get everybody to sharpen their pencil. Although realistically, I don't know how much more people will be able to sharpen them at this point in time. When you look at the amount of work that it involves to go through that process.
Thank you, Dr. Johns. Does anyone else have questions about this, comments about this? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to replacement of mower.
Okay, and if you scroll up a little bit, Jason. As I mentioned last time, the grasshopper that's located here at this building is a diesel unit, about 13 years old, and basically pretty much the engine is shot. The block needs to be replaced, and that costs us about $6,000. A lot of the times you got to look at how old the piece of equipment is and what it's used for. The actual grasshopper, I think probably part of the reason that it was originally purchased, it was here when I came, so I can't speak totally to that.
I can.
Part of it was because you could do snow removal with it.
Correct. And we had a grasshopper before this grasshopper
Okay.
that also didn't work very well for snow removal. You know, it's a machine that we purchased to try and save money because it could do multi-purpose. It can remove snow with a different attachment, and it can mow grass in the summer with the other attachment. The problem is it does pretty well with grass snow removal. It broke down all the time, and so it turned out to be not a good purchase for that purpose. So, but it drove the price up. So now we don't really use that for snow removal because it doesn't work and it breaks down frequently, and so
We're not currently using it for snow.
we are not currently using it for snow
Using it for
removal.
anything after that.
Well, understood.
But we
do not
don't.
use it for snow removal. We do
We
still
do
have
not.
one left at the middle school. That is, it's about 4 or 5 years newer. Was the middle school built in 2004, 2005?
Yes.
So it's about 5
Oh,
years
4 or 5.
older than the one that was here. Or 5 years newer than the one that was here. So at some point in the next 4 or 5 years, we'll probably need to look at that one as well. But we have, at least with the one at this building, seen increasing numbers of repairs. And while this 6,000 is a huge repair, you know, 1,000 or 1,500, you know, we've had regular repairs of that. That costs almost every year.
Seems
There's always
like it.
something that's breaking on it. And not to say that when you're using it for commercial use that you don't have that, but with the age of it, it's just getting to the point that it's probably not worth continuing to put money into it. Especially with, you know, this large amount. So we have looked at basically 2 other options. The John Deere, to replace it with another grasshopper is a little over 15,000. There's an X mark, and I want to read up a little bit more on that, but it looks like a very good commercial mower. And the price for that we can get is $10,670. There's a John Deere gasoline mower, would cost about $12,500, and the John Deere diesel is like $20,000. So, you know, diesels do last a little bit longer, but for that difference in price, it wouldn't be worth it if we were going to do that. Even with the, there's also all the issues with gelling and everything else, and that's why we, on our school buses, moved from diesel back to gasoline. Just because when we had that sub-zero weather, I mean, I don't know how much money we spent having bus drivers come out here, and then we had to have Midwest Transit out here with their mechanics helping us get buses started. And you know, there's lots of positives with diesel, but in the wintertime it's really tough, as well as you know, throughout the year. So I'm leaning toward the X mark as a recommendation, but I wanted to put the information out there and see what anybody had as far as the other thing that I'm being told too is that the parts for the X mark are the grasshopper itself is a John Deere product, I'm being told that parts are a little bit more available and we can get them quicker than we can for the John Deere. Which kind of would push me to lean toward that one, as well as it's the least costly of the three mowers that we've looked at so far that are similar, because we do, even though we have a mower that we can pull behind the tractor, there's still a lot of mowing that we do in the field across the street, as well as, you know, the general property, but especially in the field across the street, while it has grass and everything like that, it's still a field. And so you have field stones that pop up and other things that create hazards as you're mowing. So you do need something more than what you would use in your own yard. You need something a little bit more heavy duty than what we would use in our homes. So like I said, I'm leaning toward recommending the X mark. I just wanted to get the board's feel for how they feel about that, or if they have any preference. And if you're kind of in agreement that we should replace it rather than repairing something that's 13 years old.
Yeah, I definitely am in agreement with replacing versus the repair.
How about warranty comparison between those models?
I can get that when I make my recommendation. I didn't actually, I have some information on each one, but I didn't look at the specific warranties on each of them. So I'll check on that and provide that, I may even provide that to you prior to the next meeting.
You find any third-party reviews?
Yeah, I haven't looked that up yet, but that's the other thing.
So obviously, we know so much about commercial lawn-cutting equipment.
Yeah. The only one that we've had experience with has been John Deere, because that's what the grasshopper is. Anybody has any questions?
I do, Dr. Johns. How many hours a week during the warm months would you say that lawnmower would be used?
It's a good question.
My best guess is, you know, especially when the grass is growing heavily, probably 8 to 12 hours a week.
Easy.
Easily, and some weeks more than that. I mean, I've seen where, you know, we've had somebody mowing all day for like a couple days in a row. So it could even be as much as 15 or 16 hours a week.
Okay, so it's probably fair to say that over the summer it could be 20 hours a week.
Easily, yeah.
Okay. All right. Have we ever done?
I was just thinking about what it takes for the field, but there's additional mowing that takes place on our property as well.
Right. So would you? So potentially what? 25, 30 hours a week?
Probably the 20 to 25 is probably a good range, but I'll check with the maintenance staff to see the people who've done it would be the best ones to tell. I just know that when I tried to get a hold of somebody, they're always out on the mower.
Right. Okay. Have we looked into farming this work out? No pun intended, since we're talking tractors. Have we looked at services for doing the maintenance on the lawns of the campuses?
No, we haven't really done that. We used to do snow removal where we bid it out, and we learned that it was much cheaper to purchase the equipment and do it on our own than it was to pay the $40,000 or $50,000 a year that we were paying for snow removal. So my guess is that that cost is going to be more expensive, but that is something we could look at if that's something the board has a preference for.
Well, I mean, the question was, did we? So
No,
I mean,
not.
if Okay, if what you're saying is that you feel that it would be comparable to what snow removal would be, then at least you have some ballpark numbers,
Yeah,
and we
I
have
don't
some
know.
ballpark numbers to consider.
Right, I mean, I don't have the dollar amounts of what it would be for the mowing, but I would just, based on what the snow removal costs were, I can't imagine that the mowing costs would not be higher than what we can do with our own staff.
Okay.
But like I say, the only experience I've had is with the snow removal.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to do is get my head around a number as to how many hours, what the total cost of having a person or persons doing the mowing, and then the purchase and maintenance of the equipment. And I'm trying to just try to get some kind of number in my head as to what those costs are. I mean, part of the equation is certainly, the hardware, and that's what we're talking about here. But we're not saying anything about maintenance. We're not saying anything about labor. And let's put it this way: it wouldn't surprise me that it would be more cost effective, but I just don't know that.
Okay. Let me see what data we've got. I know that we broke out the labor for snow removal, any overtime for snow removal. I don't think we break out all the snow removal costs, but any overtime created during the snow season as a result of snow, I have those numbers. I don't know if we have anything similar, and I don't believe so because I haven't directed payroll to do that. But
if nothing else, it would make it easier to be able to answer the question of. Right. With everything going on, we need another, $13,000, $14,000, $15,000 or more, whatever it ends up being. And if there's questions, well, why are we spending money like that? At least there would be an answer. Well, we looked at farming it out, and this was actually the most economical way to do it. And here's the numbers.
Let me see what I can pull together.
I know, as if you don't have enough on your plate, but I'm thinking we may have to answer that question somewhere along the line, possibly. So.
Okay.
No, that was a good question, Jim. Does anyone else have anything to add or ask? All right, then let's move on to the 2020 resolutions committee report. We're going to discuss the legislative activity number 2, gun storage. This proposal that was presented to IASB is regarding gun storage. Can you pull that up, please, Jason?
I don't know that I have it at my fingertips.
I've got it, but I don't know if I have the.
Well, if I may, as we're trying to pull that up,
today. Pardon?
Bottom line here is that the IASB is at least recommending that it's not adopted. So that's, just as I'm just trying to fill in here until we can see it. That's all.
Yeah, I don't know that I can't project it for you. Jason, I can forward you the email. Do you want me to do that quick?
Sure.
Okay.
And then after the discussion, whichever way the discussion goes, how do we get this information to Mr. Gray?
So in the beginning of the packet that was sent, there's a page where you just can go through and you can select whether you're voting to support or oppose the resolutions.
Okay.
And then he can go from there once he's got everybody's information. I'll quickly read over this one just so everyone knows what we're talking about here. Be it resolved, the Illinois Association of School Boards shall support and advocate for legislation which strengthens child-safe gun storage laws in the state of Illinois, requiring gun owners to store firearms, whether they are loaded or unloaded, in a securely locked container. If a person under the age of 18 is likely to gain access to the weapon without permission, hang on, I gotta scroll up here.
Well, that's from the at first here. That's a good opening. That's a good opening statement. After that, instead of reading through the whole thing,
Okay.
it does right now. The law is that it's to what they refer to as it's right there, under the age of 14. Okay. What is it that it's not the IASB, but whoever is sponsoring this, what is it that they're trying to do, and how would they possibly enforce anything like that? So that's the discussion that I'm trying to get at.
No, that's just it. I mean the resolution committee is recommending not to adopt this. Personally, myself, I would also recommend not to adopt this strictly because it's not dealing directly with something to do inside the school.
Okay.
So that would be my rationales, because this is something that's to take place in a private home, and I don't think IASB should be stepping into a personal home. I think their focus is in the school and in the district, and I think that's also why they're resolving to recommend no to adopting it. But yeah, I your guess is as good as mine as far as how that would be enforced by IASB. They're just, my understanding is they would be lobbying for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
By the IASB, it's just a commitment of their of resources, and to push for that. And you're right, Denise, is exactly in their findings. They're saying typically they limit their focus to what happens within the district, not outside the district. While I agree with all the figures presented there, I mean, it's a terrible thing that can impact the schools. But I also think it's not the business of the IASB.
Well, I think of what I understand here, Sean, is that you agree with it, and or at least some of the data that's in there, and that's the thing that actually piqued my interest in this. There are no footnotes to any of this data.
Yeah.
None. So whoever it says it's submitted by Glenn Ellen and Carol Stream, if this is the language that they used, it's, well, first off, it's practically inflammatory, and there's no references. And I can certainly argue for some of the statistics, if you will, that they're saying that's in the proposal. So I guess my bottom line is, how are we going to direct our delegate to vote on this topic? And will the delegate vote the way that the board is directing? Because apparently that's not necessarily a given.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
No, that Jim's correct on that.
So the best that we can do for this, especially with Stephen not being at the meeting this evening, is make sure that you go through the resolutions and fill out that. It's like I think it's like the first or second page in the packet that says my board's recommendations, and fill that out and get that back to Stephen, just so he has the majority, can see what the majority is leaning to do. And yeah, I mean, with Stephen not being here this evening, we can't really discuss it with him in a meeting, but if you have any questions, I would reach out to Stephen. If you want, I can send you his phone number if you don't have that available.
Well, we can also say there's 4 of us here, and none of us want to adopt this, so it's gonna be, basically, if we put it to a vote, we would ask our representative not to support this, so that part is done with it, so we could talk to Steve, or you could talk to Steve on the side, and
Yeah, if we can just take a finding at this point.
right.
Yeah.
Are you in alignment with the committee's recommendation to not adopt?
Right.
I would say I'm in alignment with the committee to not adopt. So there's one.
Brendan, what do you think?
I recommend we do not adopt as well. Alignment
Okay.
with what recommended.
Jim, I'm not sure how you're leaning on this.
Okay,
I
so there's
recommend do not adopt.
Ardre, what about you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm saying hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Hi, Ardre.
Okay, I recommend do
I'm sorry?
adopt.
Okay. Okay. So I will let Stephen know on that issue that we did discuss this. For the remaining issues, please make sure that you go through the resolution packet so that he has kind of some guidance on where we fall.
Will do. Thank you, Denise.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so moving on to future agenda items, we will have more press policy updates, district goals, board self-governance goals, and revise the goals if necessary from, I guess we're going over last year's and looking towards next year's, or this current year, I should say. Review of board agreements, superintendent evaluation tool, and looking to revise policy 460, which is purchases and contracts. And that was something we discussed, but we discussed it as responsible bidder ordinance, but it fits under our board policy 460, so we will discuss that as well. Is there anything else we want to add to future agenda items? Okay, on to superintendent report.
Okay. I'd like to take just a brief moment to talk about our topic of the year, COVID, and what's happening in our school district. Of course, we are now in our phase 1 of our learning plan, or return to learn plan, which means that everybody is learning virtual at this point, at least for the next 2 weeks through Thanksgiving break. And I just want to share some of what we're looking at and why we're looking at it, just so everybody has some reference points, but it's going to take me just a second here. Okay, so just want to point out what the county is looking at and what we're looking at when we're talking about safely bringing students back into school and the spread of COVID and what that means for our staff safety, for our students' safety, for our community, at least what we know. There's a lot that we still don't know about COVID. We don't know how serious of a disease it is and the long-term effects. That's what We don't know yet. What we do know is that it's highly contagious. It spreads relatively quickly, and so we are trying to take steps to mitigate that because of those unknown factors. And we know that for some people it is very serious, and some people that we know have had experiences with the disease that have had serious negative consequences. So just want to put that part of it aside and just talk about the numbers, the recommendations, what the epidemiologists are telling us, what Lake County is telling us, and the CDC, and so on and so forth. So this is our threshold right here. This number is the incidence rate. We're looking at the incidence rate for Lake County and the incidence rate for the zip code 60046, which is a large portion of our district, at least as far as numbers go, of students attending and parents living. So the highest population is in 60046. The county threshold for school recommendations is 14 per 100,000. That's a daily average occurrence. So they take that number and calculate that out. That's this red line right here. As you can see, we danced along that line for most of the fall. We opened up school somewhere in here when the numbers were coming down. Early in August, we were above that line, and then again in late September, early October, we were pretty close to that line again, and then we came back down, and then we started recently to accelerate rapidly up the graph, as did Lake County. This is the point at which we moved from phase 5 to phase 3. That's where we were rocking and rolling, and everything was good for about a month in phase 5. Things were going well, but at this point we decided, okay, we need to take some steps, and we don't know what's happening. I had hoped that we were in one of these phases where we were hitting this peak and that we would start to see the numbers come down. Unfortunately, they didn't. They continued to accelerate up, and then the next week we said, okay, we're moving now from phase 3 to phase 1, which is no students in the building, and that's what happened last week. This is where the numbers were at. Since that time, they've escalated even more in our community.
So Jason, let me ask, the green is our zip code?
The green,
Blue
yep.
is Lake County.
The green is the zip code, thank you. The blue is Lake County. So this is where we're at. It's 53 point something, or 54 point something is what this number represents of new cases per day per 100,000, which translates to us 7, 8, 9 cases a day in our zip code. 14 is the threshold because in the science behind this, or the theory behind this, is that once you get to a certain point, it starts to spread exponentially. And we can see that happening, thus the steep curve to the graph. That's what happened early on in April. We saw a steep incline, and then eventually things settle down, and we are coming back down. Hopefully, at some point, we will start to see these numbers drop. But we are nowhere near starting to drop, and nowhere near the threshold where the county recommends that we come back into the school building with large groups of students. That's one area that we look at. Another number that we look at is the percent positive. So we look at the percentage of tests that are positive and taken. And the reason we look at this is for context. The county really likes that incidence rate as far as schools. They're saying that's a better number to look at. If you have to look at one number, that's the one to evaluate. But some people would argue, well, we're doing more testing now, so of course you're going to have more incidents because we're testing people at a higher rate and tests are more available.
Jason, can I ask here where the tests are being collected?
Everywhere that
So
they're
this is
reported.
It's all consolidated, reported
Correct.
regardless of testing location.
Correct. It's not one location. So we can see that actually the number of tests taken are actually dropping, which increases the positivity rate. That's why you don't want to look at positivity rate too closely, because that rate is going to be controlled by how many tests are taken. So if fewer tests are taken, your positivity rate may go up, but your incidence rate is steady. So we can see that the incidence rate, 5.6 to 6 to 6.3 is pretty steady over that time, but
And again, green is our zip code.
green is the 60046.
Seems odd that there are only 92.3 tests in Lake County,
No, this isn't Lake County.
but blue. What does blue represent?
Oh, the blue was in the thousands.
That's in thousands.
Yep, I'm sorry. I'm
6,000.
pointing to this point right here just as a reference point
Okay.
to show back here we were at 1.4 positive tests out of 72 tested. Here we're at 5.6.
So you're working on two different scales here.
Yes.
One for county, one. Okay.
Yep. And that's just to show where we're at, because we can look at county rate. If the county was high and our neighborhoods were lower, our area was pretty low, we could say there's a justification for bringing more kids back in because we're not seeing it amongst our population. But in fact, we are seeing it amongst our population, and in our community, it's the spread is significant. The other update I have is, aside from the numbers, the reality of we need staff here to operate the school. If we did, in fact, have the ability to bring kids back, or wanted to bring kids back and felt it was safe with certain numbers, this is actually should be 8. This afternoon I updated one spot, not the other, but found out another positive. And it seems like every day. This is from last Wednesday till today. There are 8 known staff members that we have that have reported positive tests, positive for COVID tests. And they are now in quarantine protocol due to testing positive. In addition, we have 12 more staff that were close contacts with those staff members. And so they are also in quarantine. So we have a total of 20 staff members, which is about 13% of our staff, our operational staff, which includes custodians, bus drivers, parapros, and faculty. So all of that group. This does not include people who are homesick or who have family members who are sick with something else or waiting for test results. These are positive test results, and then people who have been either working with them or have been exposed to them in some way, considered a close contact. So that's where we're at. I just wanted to share that to say there's a good reason why we closed school when we did, and I'm glad that we did based on what's happened since then. One could try to make an argument that the disease is not as scary and as lethal as what we first thought, which may or may not be true, but really we don't know, and there are people who are getting very, very sick with this, and we have gotten better at treatment, of course, and outcomes are somewhat better, but we really don't know the long-term effects, and that's not my point in saying this or bringing this up. My point is to say we are following from the beginning. We're going to make our decisions based on what we know. We're going to follow the recommendations of the health department and the recommendations of the Illinois Department of Public Health to the best of our abilities, and we're going to try to keep people as safe as possible, even though there's no guarantees of that at school. So that's where we're at. I'm very, very thankful, very pleased that we got about 7 weeks of school in that our teachers and staff members or bus drivers were so willing to jump in, and they said, you know, we know what the risk is, we know that it's possible, but we know you're doing everything you can to keep us as safe as possible, even though when you're dealing with children, especially younger, our youngest children who are special education, who just can't wear a mask, or it's very difficult to social distance in those cases. Our staff said, we understand this risk, we understand what we're giving up. We're giving up the ability for us to interact with some of our extended family as well. We're doing it, the kids should be in school, so they really appreciate that, and so impressed by our staff members. But it's also our responsibility to keep as many people as safe as possible. So I anticipate that it's going to be a while before we bring grade levels back, or even small groups of special ed students back. Unfortunately, I don't know when that's going to be, but looking at what's happening and what the health department predicts, what's happening is exactly what they said was going to happen all along. Is in the fall, when flu season comes, we're going to see a great increase. We've seen a little bit of COVID fatigue, which we all understand. It's just so hard to stay cooped up, and it's so hard not to interact with other people. And we have kids who are participating in different activities outside of school, which is wonderful, but the reality is that does contribute to the spread. And people also have to work. We have to work, we have to go, in some cases, have to interact with other people, and so it is spreading in our community significantly, and it is causing a disruption in our school once again. The good news is that the learning is continuing. The learning, our teachers are doing a great job of keeping the kids engaged, much better than in the spring. The remote learning is going well. Looking at the test scores from just one assessment, the MAP assessment that we did this fall, and we're able to pull that off, the numbers look pretty good. And yes, there's a little bit of a drop, but not significant, and definitely within reach of when we get going again to really pick things back up. We want the kids in school. Our teachers do, to the point where they beg to keep them in school, but it got to the point where they realized that's not going to work. And then after learning from last Wednesday, it seemed like every couple hours somebody was telling us that they were COVID positive. It was turned out we kind of just in time closed things up, button them down. So that's where we're at this point. The good news is there is hope on the future. Pfizer announced today that their trials are looking very well. So, and if anybody watched 60 Minutes last night, they talked about the process for once the FDA gives the emergency approval for whatever drug company it is. They have millions of doses out there. They are ready to go and to implement this, and they'll do it as fast as they can. So this will end. We will get through this part of life, and we will move on. But it is definitely a struggle and a hardship at this time in so many ways.
Hey, Jason,
Yes, sir.
have you been getting fewer complaints now, or is that calmed down for you, or no?
Well, I think I'd hate to say they're complaints. I think that people are frustrated. And, you know, when we close school, it's a huge disruption for families because they rely on school for not only kids' education, which is also important, but they also rely on that so they can have someplace for their kids to go while they go to work. And so daycare is very expensive. Very expensive, so it can be a burden on families, and
Well,
just making those arrangements.
Yeah, well, of course, but I refer to it as complaints because so much of it is out of your hands. So at that point, it becomes complaining. But regardless of whether you want to call it complaints or frustrations or what have you, have the emails calmed down or not yet?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Good.
Yep.
All right. Any questions for Dr. Lynn? Okay, Dr. Johns, you're up. Business office report.
Probably only about 3 things that we haven't already discussed. One is that I did go ahead and renew the contract with AT&T for the ISDN time connection, but I only did a 1-year contract because depending on where we end up going with phones will make a difference in what type of access we're going to need at that point. This basically provides the phone numbers for the middle school and kind of connects the middle school to the elementary building. So we're not really sure that is something that we are going to start working on is trying to look at a phone system. We had looked at that previously and had sticker shock because it went up like $50,000. We do now have money in the life safety fund that should be able to pay for the system. So we're going to start that process to look at what options are out there and where we can go with that. And then another item, not huge, but I did get notice of destruction of our 1999 B bonds. That was a general obligation issue of $9.3 million, was paid off in December of 2016. And after so many years, then those bonds are destroyed, and I get a certificate saying they were destroyed and that they're paid off that we keep in our files. So I just got that this past week, so I just thought I'd share that with the board. We only have 1 remaining bond outstanding, and those are the 2004 GO school bonds that paid for the Wilbur Middle School. We pulled some of those and did a refunding bond that we paid that off as well, but it hasn't been destroyed yet. So basically this 2004 general obligation bond is the only one that's still outstanding in the district. And I think when I started, we had 5 or 6 active ones. So, you know, we have gone through the process and retired several of our bonds, but we have this one that's still outstanding. And then on a positive note, we ended up from Lake County for the CARES Act funding getting $58,684 to help offset the costs of our COVID expenses.
It's great.
And that was it.
Awesome. Any questions for Dr. Johns? Okay, moving on to board reports. Does anyone have a board report? I don't. Okay. We don't have closed session this evening, correct?
Correct.
Okay, then I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. This concludes our meeting.